Hello and welcome everyone to the JMU Sports News Podcast. A bit of some different hosts today. I am Daniel Merriman, joined by Catie Harper of the DNR. How are you doing today, Catie?
Doing well, Daniel. How are you?
Not half bad. Thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to talk a little bit about the epic JMU baseball run down in the Raleigh Regional. But first, I wanted to take a little look as to the selection show process because JMU comes in towards the end of the season with a little bit of uncertainty. They take care of business in Troy winning the series, and then they still have some question marks before the Sun Belt tournament, end up losing round one, bouncing back in the losers bracket. Kind of take me through that last week or so of the season and what it was like to watch the Dukes kind of firmly sit themselves on the bubble.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting one to watch. I try to avoid speculating a lot of the time when it comes to what a team needs to get in. But I will say, I thought taking the series at Troy was massive, especially with kind of how up and down the team had been on the road this season. So getting that on the road and then going into the Sun Belt tournament, the Georgia Southern loss early definitely didn't help, but it did kind of set them up to eliminate the number one seed. And so I think once they got past Louisiana, I thought that was going to be kind of the good ticket punch, gets them in. And then the tournament ends and all of the news starts coming out that, they're on the outside looking in. And it was definitely just like a really weird weekend to follow because from my point of view, having covered the team as much as I did this season, I thought the Troy series alone probably would have been enough to get them in. But then obviously tournaments are so weird, conference tournaments, especially for baseball. Like you have so many teams that could kind of come in and just steal a bid if they win their conference tournament. So it was a little interesting to watch, but I thought they had done enough to get in. And so going into the selection show, I quite literally had two articles written, one saying they didn't get in and the other one was saying that they did. And so when it came across, I was just like absolutely kind of scurrying around trying to figure out what I was supposed to publish and what I wasn't.
Fantastic. Yeah, that last little stretch of the season was a little stressful as a JMU baseball fan and reporter. I know you always want to cover more sports, especially this being the end of the JMU athletic year. But JMU ends up getting selected to the Raleigh Regional. They find out that they're going to play South Carolina in round one. And a very special member of the South Carolina media, who is a former JMU media member, Miss Madison Horisic, was there covering some of the games with you. Can you talk about kind of that experience and what it was like to cover games again with one of your old friends? From what it sounded like, you guys were having a ball.
Yeah, I just before I say anything, I want to apologize. My cat is now moving around the table behind me, so if the camera starts moving, it's just her.
Is that
Um,
Kelsey?
it is Kelsey, and I think she's going to get down in a second. We're going to hope so. But covering it with Maddie was so much fun. I was her first editor at the paper at the Breeze. I was a senior and she was a freshman. So she's been like a little sister to me for so many years now, and we had actually never covered a game together. So she obviously had the South Carolina knowledge. She even had a little bit of NC State knowledge because she was doing an internship down there last summer. So it was like her perfect storm of teams. Sadly, she didn't have any connection to Bryant. That was the only one. So when I knew she was looking for something to do, I did some. I just kind of reached out to my editor. I was like, "Hey, just want to put this out there. Send someone else down with me." So that was just so much fun, and it was just such a regionals are so fun to cover now. And now that I know it, I need JMU to make one every single year because I had a blast. Especially like the South Carolina people, she knows like all of them. So we had a great time, and just hanging out in the press box and watching baseball all weekend was literally a blast.
That sounds like it was a ton of fun. And I don't blame you because JMU put on a show the whole weekend. Unfortunately, game one, they lose by a run after being one out away. You have USC, who hits a two-run bomb to tie the game up, forces it into extras, and then in the 10th inning, a big pop-out fly to left center ends up getting a sack fly, the game winner basically. But they played a really good game in that first game against USC and had some really nice pitching performances. Can you talk about what your viewpoint was sitting in the press box for that round one matchup?
Yeah, that was a heartbreaker would probably be kind of the only way to say it. And it's kind of like Monday morning quarterbacking it, where you look at it after the game and you're like, Eikenberry, why did you pitch to Cole Messina? Like, what are you doing? But again, you have to understand that in his mind, he is thinking, okay, you don't want to put the winning run at the plate. course, you can also look at how that guy had been batting literally the entire day, and you could say they should feel safe putting him up at the plate. So I think it was an interesting game to watch. I would say going into it, my mindset was give it like 8 pitches with Todd Mizzouki, and then you can kind of get a sense of how he's going to look in that day. And I would say he looked good. He looked kind of what he's had an up and down year. It didn't necessarily start as well as I think he would want to. He went and made the shift to the bullpen where Eikenberry wanted him to work on some mechanical changes, and it ended up benefiting the team in the long run. And I think he was a really good option to start that game. I would say, judging by how the season played out, I think a lot of us were expecting maybe a Donovan Burke to start the game, but obviously him coming out of the bullpen ended up being kind of the key to JMU's success over the weekend. So Mizzouki looked really good from that. Obviously, I know there were some people that I was seeing on social media that were maybe not thrilled with Joe Vygotsky going in when he did, but at the same time, that has been Eikenberry's guy in that role for so long that I have no problem with that being the pitcher that they threw in that moment, especially a senior, has the experience. But it's like one of those, it's one pitch to the wrong guy and it goes over the wall. And I think just kind of talking to the players after that game, I think obviously they were upset, but it was one of those things too that they knew that, you can't be down on it for too long. You have to turn around and play another game in less than pretty much like 12 hours at that point. So it was definitely an interesting one to watch. And I think for the most part, I think a lot of people kind of assumed that that would be a meeting that we saw again in a couple of days.
I think Eikenberry deserves a whole lot of props for his performance in terms of just being a manager that was not afraid to stick to his guns. And I agree when you were talking about Joe Vygotsky coming in to the point that he did against USC in that first game. He's been in that situation plenty of times in his career. He is a senior with experience, and this is the first time this JMU program has made a regional in 13 years. No one really has regional experience when it comes to closing out a game against some of the hottest SEC bats in the country. So you put good on good and you let what happens happens. But continuing through the rest of the day, you had some bounce backs into the morning. The guys were apparently feeling good, according to some Dave Rickard interviews. They go up against Bryant, and they really showed that aggressive base running that they were starting in South Carolina and executed in Bryant. They win that game 8-1, and that felt calming almost to me watching it at home that they had settled in. This wasn't their first rodeo, even though it had only been the first appearance in over a decade, but they looked comfortable in that game too. What was your thoughts there?
Yeah, a lot of it, like the Bryant press box was a lot of fun because it was just me, Maddie, and then Connor over at WHSP. So it was literally just the three of us in that press box. And so we all kind of had the same thought that while he wasn't supposed to start, Hunter Ensminger has a way of pitching that's very calming to watch, which is kind of funny when you watch him celebrate after innings. But it's just, and I guess it is like the fifth year thing. He's been around the program for a really long time, but he just, and Marlon Eikenberry said it after the game, that his energy, he just kind of calms everything down and it helps them settle. And I think you saw that early on with what he was able to do and kind of hold the Bryant batters to. But then also speaking of the base running, I had written about it Saturday morning before that game because I know there were a lot of people that were maybe not happy with some of the decisions that were made to send runners from third home against South Carolina. And, you can probably still pick those decisions apart. But at the same time, that has been JMU's game and strategy the entire season. They're going to steal, they're going to try and advance the runners, whether it be by a sacrifice bunt or literally a perfect bunt that ends up being a single stealing. That's just their brand of baseball. And, at times it can burn them. But at the same time, it's an offense that I think we've seen time and time again that can kind of make up for those mistakes if they do have a guy that gets caught out or caught stealing at second or at home. You have a Mike Mancini, a Fenwick Trimble that's not too far behind that could probably hit a home run and kind of nullify that run. So I think the Bryant game was interesting too, because I think the longer it went on, I would say there was probably a little bit more nerves about like, okay, you're not scoring maybe as much as you want to score. This is a team that they could probably maybe put a run or two up and make things interesting late. So I think it was like that late in the game. when they intentionally walked Wyatt Piper to get to Coleman Calabrese, and he was able to get that single to just get some runs across. And then there were a couple RBI singles after that. I think that inning was absolutely massive, not just to that game, obviously, and winning it, but just kind of giving the bottom of the order some confidence moving into the what ended up being the South Carolina rematch.
Yeah, I believe that Bryant game was a very nice confidence boost and just reassurance that the JMU Diamond Dukes belonged. And they certainly showed that in the second game of, I think, was it that day or was it the next day after Bryant?
Yeah, so they played Friday, Saturday, and then two on Sunday.
Two. Got it. Thank you. But the rematch against South Carolina comes, and in my opinion, for my money's worth, and I haven't watched nearly as much baseball as some people put out there, Donovan Burke had one of the best games I've ever watched a JMU Duke have. What was that experience like?
I can't even. There were points like, so it was kind of funny because of JMU playing South Carolina in the first game. A lot of the South Carolina reporters were asking us about James pitchers, and obviously we saw Donovan Burke in the first game too, but he was kind of that guy that we all said could probably start. He doesn't start, and we're like, just get ready. I'm like, they can get some hits off of him. He may hit a few batters, but it's when he has people on that things get interesting. And I think we saw that in the first game with the picking players off. And then to go into that Sunday game, I don't think any of us really expected 101 pitches on the Sunday from him, especially after throwing 54 literally 48 hours beforehand. And I just remember we kept looking in the dugout inning after inning. Right as JMU's offense had about two outs, you'd see Donovan Burke just kind of like step up to the opening in the fence right by Eikenberry, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, he's coming back into this game." Like, and it's something like having done a feature on him earlier in the year. I've heard how his coaches talk about him, and they do say he's the hardest guy to take out of a game. He will just look right through you, and he wants to be out there. He wants to have the ball in his hand. So watching that performance was absolutely unreal. And myself, Maddie, Connor, we had said it to the South Carolina reporters that honestly, there's probably not a guy on that roster that deserved an outing like that more, just kind of with what he's gone through. So to kind of see that in what ended up obviously being his last game was just unreal. And again, if you would have told me that JMU put up 2 runs against South Carolina and that was it, I probably would have told you they lost. Like, it's just how it is. It's a
Mhm.
team that they tend to need a lot of runs to score. Sorry, wow, that didn't. They need a lot of runs to win, and so to only score 2 runs, both of them being off solo home runs from Mike Mancini, and to win 2-0, haven't had a shutout in like 2 years, like absolutely unreal performance. And it's definitely one that I think I'm going to talk about for a while because I can't believe like I witnessed it in person because honestly, it was probably more impressive in person, just kind of seeing how the crowd reacted, how he reacted, his teammates. It was just absolutely insane.
He can always fire me up any day of the week if I see that Donovan Burke gif of him just strutting off the mound, ready to walk through a wall for someone. I was over the moon proud and excited for him because again, you talked about it. He deserves an outing like that, seeing the work he's put in and how consistently he's been JMU's best pitcher, excuse me, this whole year, in my opinion. And at the end of that game, I believe he had an interview afterwards talking about, yeah, I just blacked out. I don't remember the throwing of the glove. I was just in the moment, could not be happier. Needed a lot of Advil. He said he was old in that interview as well, which a fifth year will definitely experience. But
I mean,
that's a legendary JMU performance in such a legendary year.
and just like for anybody watching this to kind of get the idea of who he is on the baseball field, even in the post game interviews after at the press conference, Ike made a comment about like, yeah, no, he's not going to go at 6 o'clock tonight, and Donnie laughed and he was like, yeah, but he didn't say anything about Monday. So if they had made it to Monday, I honestly fully would have expected him to try and like somehow finesse his way back onto the baseball field. And honestly, I keep making there have been jokes made that we think he's going to find a 6th year of eligibility somewhere just so he can come out and play again because that performance was just like it was insane to watch.
I believe there was some tweet shot out, I'm not sure from quite who, that said, I think Donovan Burke has taken off the windbreaker in the NC
He
State game later that
he
day.
did. No,
He
no, no. He
did.
He did. Like he took it off and started running to the bullpen, and we're like, this can't be happening. And I even said it to Maddie. I was like, well, Ike said he wasn't going to pitch again at 6. He didn't say anything about 8:30. So he did run out there. He did go back to the dugout. So we're still not 100% sure what was going on, because we also wouldn't have been shocked if Ike just said, you know what, go to the bullpen, like just so you stop asking to go in or something.
Yeah, just give him some peace of mind. 155 pitches on the weekend and just absolute class type of stuff on top of the mound for Dono. His pickoff move, I think we've all that have watched JMU baseball throughout the year have marveled at it. And now to watch an SEC team in South Carolina and not even want to take a lead on it just made me so happy. That was the funniest thing.
We were laughing so much. We're like, they are not going to take their foot off first base right now. They're just going to keep it planted there. And they did. And then even in the second game, they took like the smallest lead off of him. But it was so funny. And I know Maddie asked Cole Messina after the game, the first game, when he had gotten his didn't technically go down as a pickoff. His went down as caught stealing because he started running after Donnie flipped the ball back. And Maddie asked him about it, and Cole Messina just started like kind of shaking his head and looking so dumbfounded. He was like, "We knew it was good. We knew it was going to be something that could happen." He's like, "That was probably the best move I've ever seen," and it was definitely a little eye opening. Eikenberry has said it all year that it's probably the best move he's ever coached, but to kind of hear it from an outsider's perspective who's not connected to the program, it was definitely cool to see because again, I think this entire season I think I correctly guessed one pickoff attempt, and that was it. Every other time, I had no idea it was coming.
Yeah, it's so deceptively within his normal movement for a pitch. And the people that call it a bulk, I hate that it's not. It's very calculated to the point where he's made it not a bulk. He studies this game so hard, and you can tell in every movement that he makes. Hi, Kelsey. It's
she's
so
she's trying so hard to get in this camera frame right now.
but it was really incredible to watch him work this weekend the way that he did. Moving into the unfortunate last game of the Duke season against NC State, they're in it until the basically final out and put up a good performance, losing 5-3 to the Wolfpack. Had some pretty solid offensive performance from a one Mike Mancini on the day who could not miss the ball.
No.
But outside of that, the Duke's offense was a little sparing. Can you talk about how Mike's performance helped propel this team into a regional final?
Uh, First of all, like 2 home runs in the first game, we thought that was going to be like it, to be completely honest, because it's absolutely just absurd to think someone's going to hit 4 solo home runs in a day. And we asked him about it too, because they didn't have a home run going into that second South Carolina game, which is definitely unheard of. And for anybody who has watched this team this year, they hit a lot of home runs. And that's just the very offensive team. And that's how they can get some runs. And so it was a little weird that they had put up as many runs as they had, and none of them are off home runs. But so he was pretty excited about those first 2 home runs against South Carolina. And then coming up against NC State and he hits the solo home run, I'm like, okay, 3 is a little stupid now. Like there's no way he's gonna hit a fourth. And then he did. And then on top of that, like sure he didn't hit a fifth home run, but he did have the RBI double.
Hmm.
So it was just everything was going right for him that day. And to have that kind of offensive power, especially behind someone like a Fenwick Trimble, who he didn't have necessarily the best Sunday he probably would have wanted, but just to have that ability to have someone who can hit Trimble in if he's on base has been absolutely massive for JMU this season.
Yeah, and Mike Mancini finishing up his true sophomore year, I believe I'm
He
correct in
is
saying that.
yep,
So
just finished second year.
hopefully going to be very exciting to watch him in a JMU uniform for years to come. But just as kind of an overview, a high point look over of the season, JMU really turns it around, being projected to finish 10th in the Sun Belt. They finish fourth. They make it to a regional final and are the closest final score at any Sun Belt team that was in a regional final, only losing by 2 runs. Marlon Eikenberry has a statement year, and his squad is certainly wanting to be back. What is your perspective towards this team's future?
It's going to be interesting. I think it's probably the best way to say it. I think you're losing a lot of really good players just who are going to be out of eligibility. I mean, there were 7 fifth-year guys that all of them pretty much at one time or another contributed. And on top of that, you're really probably looking at Fenwick Trimble being gone with the MLB draft coming up. And then if you really want to like throw it around, technically Jason Schiavone is MLB draft eligible too. So that's always a possibility. Of course, they can pull a Joe Vygotsky. He got drafted last year and he came back. So it's not saying they're going to leave if they do get drafted. But, someone like a Fenwick Trimble, I mean, you listen to any of his teammates talk about him, he's going to play professional baseball. He's just a pro. So it should be interesting losing him, losing some really good pitchers like we've talked about. Burke, he's gone. Sean Colkin's gone. Joe Vygotsky's gone. Hunter Ensminger's gone. Like you're losing a lot of pitchers that you saw over the weekend. You do get some back. Tom Mazzocchi's a junior. I'm not sure the draft is really going to be in a good, clear picture for him this year. I think he has the possibility to really develop into a really strong option as a starter next year. And then you have some young guys. I think. Oh, and I can't even believe I forgot Mason Dunaway. That's didn't necessarily contribute a ton offensively at times, but that is team captain, calming presence on defense for a lot of these guys. So it should be interesting kind of to see how they move guys around. I would say that most natural look would probably still be Mancini at second. You're probably looking at Wyatt Pfeiffer moving from third to short because he played short a lot when Mason was out this year. So there's some good pieces still remaining, but I think the biggest piece that you're going to have to look at right for next year is going to be what do the pitchers kind of do, which pitchers step up, how do they kind of fill those holes that are lost? And they have good pitchers that are young. I think JMU fans are going to see a lot more out of Jackson Logar. Jaden Kinsler was someone early in the season that I thought was really good. And he ended up I think he was getting injured and he hasn't played in a while. And I think he's someone that can really, really step up because I think it was like 11 strikeouts against Coastal Carolina in the series opener. So they have a lot of good pitchers. It will just kind of be interesting to see who kind of steps up and fills the role of a Donovan Burke, of a Hunter Ensminger. And then you also have Max School coming back, which we were supposed to see him over the weekend and then obviously did not with some injury stuff.
Yeah, and best of luck to Max Cool. Didn't sound like anything super serious, just enough to prevent him from starting. And you always want to protect pitchers' arms, especially because they had no idea if they were playing on Monday or not. If I can say this before no one else, I think I am a member and hopefully president of the Jackson Logar fan club. He has won me over the back half of this season, especially his performance in the Sun Belt tournament. He has some nasty stuff, and it's going to be super exciting to watch the freshman develop. Same thing with Kyle Langley out and left.
Jackson Logar is going to be a fun. Marlon Eikenberry had faith in this kid opening weekend against Arkansas. Like Jackson Logar went in the one game that they won and helped lock down that win. And like you're putting a freshman who's in his first weekend of the season up against one of the best SEC teams in the country and have no like worry about it. I'm like, that is a guy that, I think Eikenberry is obviously expecting to kind of grow and develop. And I mean, I tweeted it 2 days ago. Best walk-up song out of the bullpen. Paramedic, it hits different walking out of the bullpen. So I think he's going to be a fun one to watch.
I think, as mentioned on your Twitter, we need a JMU Baseball walk-up song tier list
I'll
created
do
at
it.
some point this off season.
I'll do it.
Uh,
I will say the pitchers, I think they win out versus the position players. I do think the pitchers kind of had a more solid list. So shout out to the JMU pitchers for good music.
yeah, the bullpen is carrying at the moment. You hear it here first, folks. You guys need to step it up on the infield and outfield. But overall, an incredibly successful season with tons of fun pieces to build upon. I think there was some questionings, especially before the Sun Belt move, as to if Eikenberry's seat was getting a little lukewarm. I think it's firmly cooled and chilled at this point, and he will be in Harrisonburg for so long as he wants to be, because this year and this season's performance is very indicative to future success, especially being able to recruit now in the Sun Belt, which bases its talent a lot more out of the Southeast. And I think that'll help JMU a ton. Moving into the future, being the northernmost school in a Southern conference instead of the southernmost school in a Northern conference.
And I will say, I know there are definitely like people who wanted maybe not thrilled with Marlon Eikenberry getting an extension ahead of the season, but having covered him and having these conversations with him, he's the kind of coach that you want representing your school. He's a very, very nice, approachable guy. The players really, really respect him. He's a really good recruiter. So it's one of those that I'm not, now that I've covered this team for a year, I'm not necessarily surprised he got that extension because and you do have to look at like the last 4 or 5 seasons. There have been just some outside circumstances that have really kept this team and limited this team. And it wasn't really anything he could do with, COVID, switching conferences so they're ineligible to play in a conference tournament. So it's all of these things. And I think now you're really starting to see the pieces kind of come together, the good recruiting starting to come into a clear picture. So I think he's definitely a really, really good coach to have in this position at a Sunbelt level school.
And Eikenberry Hall currently under construction on JMU's campus. We need to have one Eikenberry in full force out in Veterans Memorial Park in the time being. But yeah, thank you so much for the coverage this year. It's been a pleasure reading your work throughout the entirety of football until now. I know you got on the beat halfway through the football season, and it's been a whirlwind ever since. But yeah,
Hasn't
how's
stopped.
this year been for you? You've enjoyed it?
It was great. I kind of put it on Twitter the other day. I didn't cover baseball when I was in school here. I was pretty much only football. So kind of jumping into that and having my first full season of any sport be baseball was so much fun. It's a blast. I am really excited for football season. I can't lie. As like my bread and butter, I love football, but I can't lie either. I am kind of counting down the days to fall baseball and then the spring season because I'm really excited to spend a lot of days at a baseball field again. But in the meantime, I'll be pretty happy at a football field too. And I know that will about 2 months from now be consuming my life. So
Yeah, 80 something days or so until the home or not home opener, the season opener against Charlotte occurs. So we wish you the best of luck in the off-season football coverage because we know how crazy that can get. Uh, but thank you so much for joining on with us today. If anyone doesn't follow you, can you give them a place to look for?
yeah, feel free to follow me on Twitter. It's at Catie Harper, Catie with a C, Catie. Very important. But other than that, yeah, follow me there. I tweet 90% JMU related stuff and then like 8% pictures of my cat, 2%, whatever comes to my mind.
Yeah, some random Philadelphia sports and or
Yeah,
Tennessee
yeah.
baseball.
Yeah, I should say I am fully embracing Tennessee baseball from this point until the end of the season, just so my father can be happy. So,
Excellent.
and then
I
it's right
know
back to covering JMU objectively again.
I know plenty of people have just started tuning into the baseball tournament because JMU is in it this year, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so much fun! I didn't realize all this
Yeah,
was going on." I was like, "Yeah,
if
the
they like
NCAA baseball tournament is crazy."
college baseball is great. If you like watching home runs, turn on the Knoxville Super Regional this weekend because there will probably be like 75 of them.
Yeah, minimum, I'd guess. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so
that's
much
probably
for
low.
thank you so much for joining us along and talking some JMU baseball. Very excited to hear your thoughts moving into the fall with JMU hopefully trying to get their third season in a row ranked in the top 25 for the gridiron. But much appreciated. Please follow Catie and read all of her work at the DNR. She does incredible stuff and are very excited to hear from her in the future. All right.
Thanks for having me.